He told her he didn't need a woman with a belly. But 4 years later, the Millionaire CEO froze, because the twins beside her had his blue eyes. Eric Holloway did not raise his voice often, which made the cruelty of his words hit even harder. They came out sharp, polished, and final, the way only a man accustomed to power could speak. "I don't need a woman with a belly," he said, barely glancing up from the report on his desk. His tone wasn't angry or emotional. It was dismissive, surgical, the verbal equivalent of a door slammed in someone's face. And the worst part, the part that would echo in Lily's mind for years, was that he said it without hesitation, without guilt, without even realizing he had just shattered her. Lily stood across from him, her fingers tightening around the envelope she had brought. Her blonde hair was pulled into a loose ponytail, her blue eyes wide and vulnerable as the words pierced through her. She had rehearsed this moment for days. She had told herself he might be shocked, confused, maybe even upset, but never this. Never a knife delivered so calmly. She wanted to speak, wanted to tell him everything she had planned to say, but her throat closed instantly. Her breath hitched in her chest, refusing to leave her lungs, and all she could do was stare at the man she once believed saw something special in her. Eric didn't notice. Or pretended not to. He kept reading, flipping through pages, his expression bored, focused on numbers and profits and meetings that apparently mattered far more than the trembling woman standing in his office. He didn't ask why she had come. He didn't wonder why she looked pale or nervous or hurt. He simply dismissed her existence with that single careless sentence. The envelope slipped slightly in her hand. Inside it was the ultrasound, tiny, blurry, undeniable proof that her life was shifting forever. She had imagined placing it on his desk, imagined watching shock spread across his face, imagined that maybe, just maybe, beneath all his arrogance, he had the capacity to care. But looking at him now, the image shattered just as painfully as her hope. She swallowed, forcing down the taste of disappointment, and whispered, "Okay." It was the only word she could manage, and even that felt heavy, fragile, as if it might crumble. Her voice was barely audible, but it made Eric finally glance up. Their eyes met for half a second. His were cold and irritated, as if she were delaying something important. Hers brimmed with hurt he didn't bother to see. He blinked once. "Is that all?" Lily nodded because she couldn't trust her voice anymore. She pressed the envelope against her chest, as if protecting the tiny life inside it from the man in front of her. She turned, walking toward the door with careful steps, determined not to break down in front of him. The air felt thick, too warm, too heavy. The sound of her heartbeat echoed in her ears, drowning out the distant clicking of keyboards and muffled conversations outside his office. When she stepped into the hallway, she finally breathed. Not freely, but enough to keep moving. Enough to get to the elevator. Enough to leave before her tears betrayed her. Her reflection in the elevator doors looked unfamiliar, pale, shaken, defeated. She pressed a hand to her stomach, the reality of her situation sinking in with terrifying clarity. This wasn't just heartbreak. This wasn't just rejection. She was completely on her own now. She didn't go back to her desk. She didn't collect her things. She walked out of the building, out into the cold evening air, and kept walking until she reached her tiny apartment. Only then did her strength collapse. She sat on the floor, back against the door, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. She whispered apologies to the baby growing inside her, apologies she had no reason to make except that she felt like she had already failed. Hours passed before she stood again. She moved slowly, packing a small suitcase, choosing only what she absolutely needed. She didn't know where she would go, only that she couldn't stay here, not in this city, not near him, not where every memory would remind her of what she had hoped for and what had been destroyed in a single sentence. By dawn, she was gone. The apartment was empty, the keys left on the counter, the ultrasound still tucked safely in her bag. She boarded a bus heading anywhere but here, pressing her forehead against the cool window as the city faded behind her. Eric Holloway didn't notice she was gone. Not that day. Not that week. But one day, years later, he would remember that sentence, the one he spoke so casually, and it would haunt him in a way he never expected. Lily woke the next morning with a heaviness that seemed to fuse her to the thin mattress beneath her. For a moment, she lay there in the gray early light, staring at the ceiling and pretending her life hadn't changed overnight. But the moment she rolled onto her side, nausea surged through her, sharp and sudden, forcing her out of bed and into the bathroom where she gripped the sink and tried to steady her breathing. Her reflection looked pale and exhausted, the faintest hint of dark circles under her eyes. She rinsed her face with cold water, hoping it would clear her thoughts, but nothing washed away the memory of Eric's voice, calm, dismissive, final. She spent the next few days drifting through the small town she'd chosen almost blindly, taking the first bus that traveled far enough from the city where he lived. The town wasn't much: quiet streets, low buildings, a grocery store that closed before sunset, but it felt safe in a way she desperately needed. The tiny rented room she found wasn't glamorous, but it gave her 4 walls and a door she could close behind her. That alone felt like a victory after running through the night with nothing but a suitcase and a heart that wouldn't stop aching. The nausea didn't go away. Morning after morning, she barely made it to the bathroom in time, her body reminding her of the life she carried within it, a life that didn't care about heartbreak or loneliness. She bought a pregnancy test to confirm what she already knew, though her hands shook as she opened the box. She had hoped seeing the truth with her own eyes might bring clarity, but when the test flashed positive, a wave of emotions crashed into her: fear, wonder, grief, love, each one stronger than the last. The next weeks passed slowly but relentlessly. She found part-time work at the only diner in town, wiping tables and pouring coffee with a forced smile. The smell of food often made her nauseous, but she gripped the counter and powered through each shift because she had no other choice. She saved every dollar, calculating expenses late into the night, trying to build a future from nothing. Her clothes grew tighter, her body changed, and she felt alternately fragile and fierce, depending on the hour. She never reached out to anyone from her old life. She didn't have many people to begin with, and those she did know were connected to Eric's world, a world she refused to return to. She didn't want pity. She didn't want advice. She didn't want anyone to tell her she needed him. She had learned painfully that she needed no one but herself and the tiny heartbeat she heard during her first prenatal appointment: rapid, strong, defiant. The doctor smiled warmly at the ultrasound screen. "Looks like one healthy baby," she said, turning the monitor so Lily could see. But as she moved the wand across Lily's stomach, her eyebrows lifted. "Actually." Lily's heart kicked hard. "What? That's 2 heartbeats." Her breath caught. "Twins?" "Twins," the doctor confirmed, the hint of a laugh in her voice. "2 little ones." Lily didn't know whether to cry or laugh, so she did both. The doctor handed her tissues and waited patiently while Lily took in the magnitude of what she'd heard. She wasn't just becoming a mother. She was becoming a mother of 2. 2 lives. 2 little hearts. 2 souls who would depend entirely on her. The weight was terrifying and miraculous all at once. The months that followed were some of the hardest of her life. Her body ached constantly. Her stomach grew faster than she expected, stretching her skin and pressing against her ribs. She worked until the diner manager gently insisted she reduce her hours, seeing how she struggled to stand for long periods. She found a job cleaning rooms at the small hotel across town: lighter work, flexible hours, a boss who didn't ask questions. She attended every doctor's appointment alone. She watched each ultrasound, amazed as tiny limbs formed, as spines arched, as hearts beat in perfect harmony. She learned about nutrition, newborn care, sleep routines, and budgeting for 2 infants. She bought second-hand baby clothes, washed them carefully, folded them with trembling hands, and tucked them into a clean cardboard box she kept beside her bed. She talked to her babies at night, her palms resting gently on her stomach as she whispered promises she intended to keep for the rest of her life. She never spoke his name. She never allowed herself to imagine what might have been. But sometimes, when the babies kicked and she lay awake in the stillness of her room, she wondered if Eric would have cared, even a little, if he had known. If he would have softened at the sound of 2 heartbeats. If he would have put a hand on her stomach and felt awe instead of disgust. But then she remembered his words, cold, dismissive, unforgiving, and the questions dissolved into silence. When the day finally arrived and she went into labor, she was terrified. She called a taxi, gripping her bag tightly, breathing through the contractions as the car bounced through potholes. The hospital room was small but bright. Nurses moved with efficient kindness, offering encouragement she clung to like a lifeline. Hours passed in waves of pain and exhaustion, but Lily fought through every minute because she knew what waited on the other side. When Lucas was born, he let out a furious, strong cry that filled the room. When Leia followed minutes later, her first sound was softer but just as determined, her tiny fingers curling instinctively around Lily's. Tears streamed down her face as she held them both, overwhelmed by the depth of love surging through her. They were perfect. Dark-haired, blue-eyed, small and fragile and impossibly strong. She whispered to them softly, her voice shaking with emotion. "I will love you. I will protect you. I will give you everything I never had." She didn't think about Eric that night. She refused to let him intrude on something so pure. She focused on the weight of her newborns against her chest, the tiny breaths, the small fingers gripping hers. Her life was no longer defined by his rejection or by the loneliness he left behind. Her life was defined by the 2 children sleeping against her heart. The past had broken her. But the future, wrapped in soft blankets and held in her trembling arms, gave her a reason to rise again. Eric Holloway had spent most of his adult life sculpting himself into the kind of man who could not be shaken. He built empires, negotiated billion-dollar deals, and dismissed people, employees, partners, women, without flinching. But in the years after Lily disappeared, the armor he once took pride in began to suffocate him. At first, he didn't notice the change. He worked the same ruthless hours, surrounded by advisors who admired his ambition and feared his temper. But the moment he returned home to his penthouse each night, silence greeted him like a punishment he hadn't yet earned. He filled that silence with work, with numbers, with acquisitions, with anything that kept him from thinking too deeply. His assistants rotated every few months, worn down by his impossible standards. He dated occasionally, never seriously, choosing women who expected nothing from him because he had nothing to give. Nights blurred into mornings, and the only constant in his life was the nagging sense that something essential was missing. Something he had let slip through his fingers without realizing its worth. He pretended he didn't think about Lily. Pretended she had been insignificant, a passing distraction, a mistake he had corrected before it cost him anything. But the truth revealed itself in quieter moments, the way he caught himself searching for her laugh in crowded rooms, the way he glanced at blonde women too long, the way he avoided certain streets because they reminded him of her. Sometimes he even reached for his phone at night, fingers hovering over her old number before he forced himself to set it down. He had no right to contact her. He had made that impossible the day he dismissed her with words that still echoed in his mind like a curse. He told himself she had moved on. That she had probably forgotten him. That she was out there living a quiet life untouched by the chaos he carried with him. But beneath the polished exterior of the CEO, a guilt he didn't understand gnawed at him. He had pushed many people away before, but none had left a shadow the way she did. He didn't understand why. He didn't want to understand. Understanding required acknowledging that he had made the biggest mistake of his life without even realizing it. As the years passed, his world narrowed. Success brought him no joy. Celebrations felt empty. Even the victories he once chased so relentlessly left him feeling hollow. His board members noticed the shift, though they never mentioned it aloud. His mother worried, sensing the loneliness in his clipped phone calls. Even his reflection in the mirror looked different, older, more tired around the eyes, like a man fighting an invisible battle he didn't know how to win. One night, after a particularly grueling day of meetings, Eric found himself in his office long after everyone else had left. The city lights glittered outside his floor-to-ceiling windows, but instead of feeling powerful, as he once had, he felt small. Insignificant. He poured himself a drink, taking slow, deliberate sips as he stared at the skyline. He didn't know why the memory surfaced then, why it struck him with such force. But suddenly, he saw Lily standing in his office again, the envelope in her hand, the tremble of her fingers, the quiet devastation in her eyes. The memory was sharper than it should have been, too detailed, too vivid. He closed his eyes, and for the first time, he wondered if she had been trying to tell him something important that day. Something that might have changed everything. But he dismissed her before she could speak. He threw her away without listening. Without knowing. A cold realization settled over him, so heavy it made his breath catch. What if she had been pregnant? What if the life she carried that day had been his? What if his cruelty had forced her to disappear not just to protect herself, but to protect their child? He tried to shake the thought away. He tried to rationalize, tried to remind himself that Lily was strong and independent, and if she'd wanted him to know something, she would have told him. But the truth was undeniable, he had never given her a chance. He had shut her down so violently that she would have been a fool to stay. The next morning, he asked his assistant to look into Lily's whereabouts. The assistant tried. She searched records, reached out quietly, checked employment histories. But Lily had vanished without a trace. No forwarding address, no social media, no mutual acquaintances willing to talk. It was as if she had slipped off the map entirely. Eric pretended the news didn't affect him, but the hollow ache in his chest grew sharper with each passing day. Something had been missing for years, and now he finally understood what. He had lost her. Lost her before he even realized she mattered. Months turned into years, and though he didn't stop searching, he learned to live with the dull ache of failure. The cruel sentence he had tossed at her, "I don't need a woman with a belly," played in his mind at night like a punishment he fully deserved. He knew he had been arrogant, blind, foolish. And the possibility that she had been carrying his child haunted him with a quiet, relentless cruelty. He never imagined he would see her again. Never imagined she was still connected to his world. Never imagined she had built a life that included 2 small children who carried echoes of his own face. But fate was patient. And fate had a cruel sense of timing. For years after he pushed her away, a routine visit to one of his hotels would lead him straight to the truth he had feared, avoided, and unknowingly longed for. And nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same again. Eric Holloway stepped into the lobby of the Riverside Grand Hotel with the same confidence he carried into every building he owned, but something in the atmosphere felt different the moment he crossed the threshold. Maybe it was the faint scent of fresh coffee drifting from the cafe, or the soft hum of guests chatting near the fireplace. Maybe it was simply that this hotel, tucked in a quiet town hours from the city, felt more human than the towering luxury structures he usually occupied. He didn't know yet that the shift in the air was a warning, quiet, subtle, preparing him for what was about to unfold. His entourage followed him inside, his assistant, 2 regional managers, and a nervous young employee who kept tripping over his own clipboard. They launched into updates and statistics, but Eric barely listened. His mind was elsewhere. His nights had been restless lately, filled with memories he tried to bury. He didn't understand why they haunted him with such persistence now. He didn't understand why Lily's face, frightened, heartbroken, trembling, kept forcing its way into his thoughts. He pushed the emotion away, burying it behind the familiar facade of professionalism. He moved deeper into the lobby, his steps purposeful, scanning the space with the calculating precision of a man who missed nothing. He reviewed the decor, the staff efficiency, the general condition of the space, details he normally dissected effortlessly. But today his gaze drifted unfocused, drawn instead toward a distant corner where children's laughter echoed softly. Two small figures ran into view, tiny feet pounding across the carpet, light giggles ringing out in carefree bursts. A boy and a girl around 4 years old, both with soft dark hair that bounced with each step, both with brilliant blue eyes that mirrored the exact shade Eric saw in the mirror every morning. He froze. His breath caught in his throat. The air thickened around him, pressing against his ribs like a vice. He stared, unable to look away. His mind raced through explanations, coincidence, imagination, déjà vu, but none of them held. The resemblance was too strong, too sharp, too impossible to dismiss. The boy skidded to a stop, laughing breathlessly as the girl grabbed his hand and tugged him toward the reception desk. They were perfect reflections of each other, identical in features except for small differences in expression. The boy was bold, curious, quick. The girl was softer, observant, cautious yet bright. Eric's pulse hammered. He took a slow step forward, then another, unable to control the compulsion drawing him closer. Every instinct in him screamed that this was important, that this was something he needed to understand immediately. His assistant was still talking beside him, but Eric heard none of it. He raised a hand to silence the man without looking away from the children. And then he saw her. Lily stepped into the lobby from the west corridor, holding a stack of fresh towels against her chest. She wore the deep blue uniform of the hotel's housekeeping staff, her hair tied in a loose ponytail that brushed her shoulder. Her face looked thinner, more tired, older in a way that made Eric's chest tighten painfully. But she was still unmistakably Lily, beautiful, gentle, strong in a way he had never appreciated before. She turned toward the children, her expression softening instantly as they ran to her. The boy jumped into her arms, the girl pressed against her side, and Lily laughed, a small, exhausted sound that carried more love than anything Eric had ever given her. She said something he couldn't hear, her voice too soft to carry across the lobby, and the twins nodded eagerly. Her eyes lifted. She looked over their heads. And then she saw him. The towels in her arms slipped slightly. Her face went white, almost translucent, and she froze the way a deer freezes moments before bolting. Eric felt the air leave his lungs. It was the reaction of someone who had spent years trying to forget him. Someone who had no desire to see him again. Someone holding a life he had never known existed. He didn't move. She didn't move. The twins stared between them curiously, oblivious to the weight of the moment. Finally, Lily turned sharply, clutching the children and trying to hurry them toward the hallway behind her. Panic shot through Eric. He couldn't just let her disappear again, not without knowing the truth, not without understanding. He stepped forward, calling her name. Lily. His voice wasn't sharp this time. It wasn't cold or dismissive. It was strained, raw, heavy with emotions he didn't know how to handle. But Lily flinched as if he had shouted. She didn't slow. She didn't look back. Eric followed. Lily, wait. His steps grew faster, and for the first time in years, his body trembled, not with anger or impatience, but with fear. Real fear. She stopped only when she reached the staff hallway, out of sight from guests, out of view from his team. She turned then, her back pressed to the wall as she positioned herself between him and the children, shielding them. She looked nothing like the girl he once dismissed so cruelly. She looked like a mother ready to fight for her children with everything she had. "Don't come closer," she said, her voice sharp with panic. Eric froze immediately. His hands lifted slightly in surrender. "I'm not going to hurt you." "You already did," she whispered, and the words sliced through him, deeper and sharper than anything he'd felt in his life. He swallowed, his throat tight. "Those children." His voice cracked despite his attempt to steady it. "Are they?" "Yes," Lily said before he could finish. Her voice didn't waver. "They're yours." The truth hit him like impact force, stealing his breath and leaving him unsteady. He felt his knees weaken. His fingertips tingled. For a moment, he thought he might collapse. His children. His twins. Here. Alive. Beautiful. 4 years old. For years he had missed. For years he had thrown away. Emotion surged violently inside him, grief, joy, terror, guilt, all mixing in a way that made his vision blur. He stared at the little boy and girl, drinking in every detail, realizing they looked at him with curiosity, not recognition. Because he had never been there. Because he had never known. Because he had driven away the only woman who could have told him. Lily's eyes filled with a storm of anger and something deeper, pain, betrayal, fierce protectiveness. "You don't get to show up now and pretend you care," she said quietly. "You don't get to rewrite the past." Eric opened his mouth, but no words came. His throat burned. His hands shook. Everything in him shattered as he stood there in the hallway, face to face with the consequences of the worst sentence he'd ever spoken. He had told her he didn't need her. And now he realized he needed nothing more in the world. Not power. Not money. Not success. Just them. But Lily didn't believe that, not yet. And he didn't know whether she ever would. He only knew one thing with absolute clarity: he would spend the rest of his life trying. Lily led the children away from him with short, quick steps, as if any extra second spent near him placed them in danger. Eric followed only with his eyes, unable to trust himself to move. When she finally stopped near the staff lounge, she turned sharply and motioned for the twins to stay close. Her breath trembled as she looked at him again, really looked, and it was the first time he saw just how exhausted she truly was. Not just physically, but in the kind of way that comes from years of carrying burdens alone. He didn't dare step closer. His entire body felt wired with a trembling energy he couldn't control. He kept his hands where she could see them, desperately trying not to frighten her any more than he already had. The twins stood beside her, Lucas slightly ahead, Leia tucked behind her mother's leg. They watched him with confusion, curiosity, and something else he didn't want to name yet because he wasn't sure he deserved it. Lily swallowed hard, her throat visibly tight. "Why are you here, Eric?" "I came to check the hotel," he said softly, though the words tasted strange and meaningless now. "I had no idea you worked here. I had no idea you were even in this state. I've been searching for you for years." She flinched at the word searching, as if it offended her. "You don't get to say that. You don't get to claim you were trying when you're the reason I had to disappear in the first place." He nodded, unable to argue, because she was right. He had been the one who pushed her away. He had been the reason she ran. And now he was the one dealing with the consequences of his own arrogance. "I know," he whispered. "But Lily, please. Let me understand. Let me talk to them. Let me be here." Her eyes flashed with a mixture of raw pain and fierce protectiveness. "You think you can just walk into their lives after 4 years? After what you said to me?" He took a shaky breath. "No. I don't think that. I know I don't deserve that. But I can't walk away now. Not after seeing them. Not after seeing you. Lucas tilted his head, studying Eric with thoughtful seriousness far beyond his age. Mama, why is he looking at us like that? Lily knelt immediately and cupped his face, forcing her voice into a steady softness for her son. Because he's a stranger, honey. And strangers shouldn't stare. The word stung, but Eric didn't protest. He understood what she was doing, protecting her children by distancing them from a man who had once hurt her. Leia peeked out from behind Lily's arm, her small fingers tugging at her mother's sleeve. Mama, he has the same eyes as Lucas. The sentence hit harder than anything Lily had said. She froze. Lucas blinked slowly, turning back toward Eric with renewed curiosity. He kinda does, he said innocently. Like the sky. Eric felt his breath catch in his chest. He had never imagined that hearing his own children notice their resemblance to him could be so excruciatingly beautiful. Lily's fingers tightened around Lucas's shoulder. Kids notice everything, she muttered quietly, mostly to herself, as if trying to regain control of the situation. He forced himself to speak gently. Lily, please give me 5 minutes with them. Just 5. I swear I won't push past whatever boundary you set. She hesitated. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes moved from him to the twins and back again. She was thinking, calculating, fearing, remembering. And Eric saw every emotion flickering across her face. He wished he could erase the memory of himself in her mind, wished he could go back and undo everything that led to this moment. But life didn't work like that. He knew he could never undo what he had done. He could only try to show her he wasn't the same man anymore. Finally, she exhaled shakily. 5 minutes. Outside. Where there are people around. And you don't touch them without permission. From me or from them. He nodded immediately, gratitude rising in his chest so quickly it almost hurt. Thank you. I won't forget this, Lily. Don't thank me, she said in a low voice. This is for them, not you. They walked out to the garden behind the hotel, a quiet space with stone benches and scattered flower beds. Lily kept the twins close, and Eric remained several feet away, afraid to cross any invisible line. He didn't know how to speak to children, let alone his own. But when Lucas marched up to him with a determined little face, holding a small toy truck in his hand, Eric nearly lost his balance from the emotion that rushed through him. Do you know how to fix wheels? Lucas asked with the seriousness of a child expecting the world. Mine's stuck. Eric lowered himself slowly, kneeling so he wouldn't tower over the boy. I can try, he said, his voice soft and careful. Can I see it? Lucas placed the truck in his hands without hesitation. Eric's fingers trembled slightly, but he managed to loosen the tiny wheel and snap it back into place. Lucas gasped in awe, then broke into a wide grin that seemed to light something dormant inside Eric's chest. Leia watched, then edged closer. Do you know how to braid hair? She asked shyly. Mama says my hair is slippery. Eric blinked, startled by the question. I don't, he admitted honestly. But I can learn if you want me to. Leia nodded slowly, seeming to approve. Lily watched from a distance, arms crossed tightly. She didn't interfere, but her entire body was tense, ready to pull the children away the second she sensed anything wrong. Her eyes were sharp and guarded, but there was something else hidden deep behind the anger, fear of letting herself trust him again. The 5 minutes stretched into 10. Then 20. Lily finally walked forward, her voice steady. That's enough for today. Lucas and Leia protested, but she took their hands gently. Eric stood as she approached, his heart racing. He wanted to say something meaningful, something that would show her he wasn't that cold, careless man anymore. But all he managed was a quiet, thank you, for letting me meet them. Lily didn't answer. She simply nodded once, her expression unreadable, and walked away with the twins. Eric stood there long after they were gone, feeling the world tilt under his feet. For the first time in years, something inside him cracked open, not pain, but a desperate, raging determination. He had lost 4 years. For years he would never get back. But he would not lose a fifth. Not if he had any power left in him to fight for them. Lily didn't intend to let Eric become a frequent presence in their lives, but life has a way of slipping past all the rules we try to place around it. After their first encounter, she assumed he would disappear again, that his guilt would fade, and he would go back to his world of marble offices and quiet elevators and quarterly earnings. But he didn't. The very next morning, he returned. And the morning after that. And the one after. He showed up with a patience she didn't expect, with a steadiness she didn't trust, and with a quiet humility she didn't know he was capable of possessing. He never barged in. Never demanded to see the children. Never used his power or status to intimidate her. Instead, he texted her with a straightforward question each time: "Is today a good day for me to visit the twins?" If she said no, he didn't argue. If she said yes, he showed up early and waited outside until she was ready. It was strange, unsettling even, to see him so careful, so considerate, so unlike the man who had once dismissed her as if she were nothing. The twins adjusted to him quickly, far quicker than Lily expected. Lucas adored him first. The boy had a bold, fearless heart, one that recognized sincerity faster than adults did. Whenever Eric entered the garden behind the hotel, Lucas sprinted toward him with an excitement that made Lily's stomach twist. She couldn't deny the truth anymore: her son saw something good in the man she feared. Leia took longer. She hovered near Lily at first, observing the way Eric moved, the way he spoke, the way he reacted when Lucas tugged on his sleeve. She was quieter, more cautious, but her trust grew steadily with each passing day until one afternoon she walked up to Eric on her own, holding a small pink flower she had picked from the garden, and placed it gently into his palm. The moment had nearly broken him. Lily saw it in the way he froze, in the way tears formed instantly but didn't fall, in the way he swallowed hard before kneeling to her level and saying thank you with a voice that trembled slightly. Leia beamed, and Lily's heart ached with something bittersweet and terrifying. Day by day, a fragile rhythm formed. The twins played near the fountain, or chased butterflies, or built little rock towers beside the benches. Eric joined them on the ground without hesitation, ruining expensive trousers without caring. He learned how to fix tiny toys, how to count to 20 in 3 different silly voices, how to interpret Leia's expression when she wanted to be held but was too shy to ask. He learned which snacks Lucas hated and which stories made both kids burst out laughing. He learned them, truly learned them, in a way Lily had never imagined he would want to. And she watched. She didn't participate at first. She stood off to the side with her arms folded, monitoring every interaction, every moment, every smile. But as weeks passed, the tightness in her shoulders loosened. She found herself sitting on the bench instead of standing. She found herself answering when Eric asked her about the twins' favorite foods or bedtime routines. She found herself catching him glancing at her with soft, complicated eyes he quickly hid whenever she noticed. One afternoon, after an especially tiring work shift, Lily brought the twins to the garden expecting a short visit. Instead, she arrived to find Eric already there, dressed casually for the first time she had ever seen. He wore a worn gray t-shirt and jeans, his dark hair mussed slightly, as if he had been sitting on the grass for a while. He didn't look like a CEO that day. He looked like a man who belonged exactly where he was, waiting for his children. Lucas ran straight into his arms. Leia followed, slower but smiling. Lily watched them laugh together, her throat tightening. Something deep within her stirred, a fear mixed with longing, resentment mixed with warmth, scars mixed with healing. She walked toward them slowly, unsure why her legs felt shaky. Eric looked up at her, shielding his eyes from the sun. "Hey," he said gently. "I didn't want to bother you. They just wanted to show me the drawings they made yesterday." "You're not bothering," she said quietly, surprising herself with the honesty in the words. He froze, just for a second, and something fragile flickered across his face: hope, disbelief, gratitude. Later, when the twins ran off to chase a butterfly, Eric and Lily sat side by side on the bench, though a polite distance still remained between them. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the garden. The fountain bubbled softly. The air smelled of damp leaves and warm earth. It felt peaceful in a way Lily hadn't experienced in years. "I know I haven't earned anything from you," Eric said, keeping his eyes on the twins. "Not trust. Not forgiveness. Not even this time with them. But I'm grateful you're letting me try." Lily swallowed. "I never wanted to raise them alone." The confession slipped out before she could take it back. Eric's head turned sharply toward her, his expression pained, apologetic, raw. "You shouldn't have had to," he said quietly. "If I had known." She shook her head. "You didn't want to know." He flinched. The truth crushed him every time she said it, and she knew it. But she wasn't trying to hurt him. She was simply stating the reality he had created. "I'm not asking for anything," Eric said slowly. "Not yet. Not from you. I just want to be someone they can count on. Someone who's there." "You think you can be that?" she asked softly. He looked at her then, fully, deeply, his blue eyes burning with sincerity she didn't expect. "I already am trying," he whispered. "And I'll keep trying every day, as long as you'll let me." She didn't respond immediately. She watched the twins, watched their joy, watched the way Eric lit up simply being near them. When she finally spoke, her voice was steadier than she felt. "They like you," she said. His breath caught. "I like them more than I ever thought possible." "And me?" she asked before she could stop herself. He turned to her again, but this time his gaze softened in a way that made her heartbeat quicken. You're the person I wish I had been smart enough to value from the beginning." Her breath faltered. Her heart clenched. She looked away quickly, afraid of the weight of those words. Before she could reply, Leia ran to the bench and climbed onto Eric's lap without hesitation. Lucas followed, pressing against his other side. The twins leaned on him as if they had always known him, always trusted him, always belonged to him. And Lily saw it clearly, more clearly than she wanted to. Eric Holloway wasn't the same man she had run from. He wasn't the man who dismissed her. He wasn't the man who refused a future with her. He was someone new. Someone changed. Someone who loved their children. Someone who might still, dangerously, impossibly, love her. And she wasn't sure if she was ready for that truth, but one thing was certain: she wasn't pushing him away anymore. Lily had weathered many difficult nights in the last 4 years, but none frightened her the way this one did. It started with something small: Leia rubbing her eyes more than usual, leaning against Lily's side with less energy than her twin. Lily assumed she was tired after a long day. But by dinner time, Leia pushed her food away, her cheeks flushed, her little body unsteady as she crawled into Lily's lap. When Lily touched her forehead, her heart dropped. The heat radiating from Leia's skin was far too strong to be simple fatigue. Within an hour, the fever spiked. Leia's breathing quickened, her limbs shaking slightly as she curled into a ball, whimpering softly. Lily tried everything she knew: cool cloths, gentle rocking, whispered comfort, but nothing helped. Panic rose inside her like a tide. She'd handled fevers before, but this felt different, more dangerous, as if something terrible was just beneath the surface. She reached for her phone with trembling fingers, hesitated for a split second, then dialed the only person she knew would come immediately. Eric answered on the first ring. "Lily?" His voice was alert, sharp with concern even before she spoke. "It's Leia," she said, her breath shaking. "Her fever won't go down. She's trembling, and, please, I can't do this alone. I'm on my way." There was no hesitation, no questions, no irritation. Just a rush of movement on his end and the sound of a door slamming behind him. He arrived in 8 minutes. Lily didn't know how he managed it. When he walked into the small living room, barefoot and wearing only sweatpants and a t-shirt, he looked nothing like the polished CEO she used to know. His hair was mussed, his chest rising and falling fast, his eyes wide with fear as he took in the sight of the trembling little girl curled against Lily. "Let me see her," he said quietly, kneeling beside them. Lily shifted Leia into his arms, her heart twisting painfully at how naturally her daughter fit against his chest. Leia's tiny fingers clutched the fabric of his shirt as she whimpered, her face pressed into his shoulder. Eric swallowed hard, stroking her back gently with a tenderness Lily had never imagined he possessed. "We need to get her to the hospital," he said, voice tight with barely controlled fear. Lily nodded, grabbing her bag, barely managing to hold back tears. Lucas clung to her leg, frightened, and Eric scooped him up without thinking, murmuring words of comfort as they hurried to the car. He strapped both children in with trembling hands, glancing at Leia every few seconds as if terrified she might slip away from him. The drive was a blur of speeding headlights and shallow breaths. Lily sat in the back seat with Leia on her lap, feeling the heat radiating from her daughter's skin. Eric drove with both hands tight on the wheel, his jaw clenched so hard it looked painful. He kept looking at them through the rearview mirror, his eyes dark with worry every time Leia whimpered. At the hospital, nurses rushed forward immediately. Eric stayed glued to Lily's side as the medical team placed Leia on the examination bed, checking her temperature, pulse, and breathing. Lily's hands shook uncontrollably. She tried to focus on the doctor's explanation, but the words blurred. Eric touched her shoulder lightly. "I'm here. I'm not leaving." She didn't know how much she needed those words until she heard them. She let herself lean into him, just a little, as the doctor explained the diagnosis, a sudden viral infection causing a dangerously high fever. They would give Leia fluids, fever reducers, and monitor her through the night. When they finally settled into a small room, Leia lay curled under a blanket, hooked to and fore, her little breaths shallow but steadier. Lucas slept on Lily's lap, exhausted from crying. Eric sat in the chair beside the hospital bed, elbows on his knees, his hands covering his face for a long moment. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red, and the expression he wore nearly shattered her. "This is my fault," he whispered. Lily froze. "What?" "No, Eric, it's a virus, not. I missed everything," he said, his voice cracking. "All of this. Her birth. Her first word. Her first steps. Every moment she needed me. And now I'm here for the worst one." Lily opened her mouth to protest, but the pain in his expression silenced her. He wasn't blaming himself for the sickness, he was blaming himself for the years of absence he could never undo. He looked at Leia with such raw heartbreak that Lily felt her own defenses crumble. "She's going to be okay," she said softly, placing a hand on his arm. "You didn't cause this." He looked at her, and his voice softened to something unbearably sincere. I wish I had been there. For all of it. For you. For them." Silence settled between them, but it wasn't the cold silence of years ago, it was fragile, warm, trembling with vulnerability neither of them knew how to voice. Hours passed. Lily eventually drifted into a light, exhausted sleep with Lucas in her arms. Eric stayed awake the entire night, never once taking his eyes off Leia. He watched her chest rise and fall, adjusting her blanket gently, his hand hovering protectively. When the first soft rays of dawn entered the room, Leia opened her eyes, weak, but awake. Eric leaned forward instantly, his voice quiet but overflowing with relief. "Hey, sweetheart. You scared us." Leia blinked slowly and whispered, "Daddy?" The word slipped out naturally, unconsciously, without hesitation. Lily jolted awake, eyes widening. She stared at her daughter, then at Eric, who froze completely, lips parted, breath stolen. He swallowed hard, blinking rapidly as emotion flooded his face. He reached for Leia's hand, squeezing it gently. "Yeah," he said in a voice that cracked. "I'm right here." Lily felt tears rise in her eyes, not from fear, but from something far deeper. Something she had been fighting for months. Something she no longer had the strength to deny. Leia drifted back to sleep, her tiny hand still wrapped around Eric's. He didn't let go. And Lily, watching him through blurry eyes, knew with painful clarity that the man she feared for so long was gone. The man sitting beside her now, tired, vulnerable, terrified, devoted, was someone entirely different. Someone her children needed. Someone her heart, despite everything, wasn't sure it could resist anymore. Lily brought Leia home 2 days later, exhausted but relieved, carrying her daughter as if she were the most precious and fragile thing in the world. Eric insisted on driving them, moving slowly, checking the mirrors every few seconds, terrified the slightest bump might disturb Leia or frighten Lucas. When they arrived at the small apartment, he carried the bags without being asked and hovered near the doorway as if unsure whether he was welcome to step farther inside. Lily noticed his hesitation, noticed the way his hand trembled around the strap of the diaper bag, and surprised both of them by saying quietly, "You can come in. For a little while." He stepped inside, looking around with a strange mix of curiosity and guilt. The apartment was small but clean, filled with children's drawings, mismatched toys, and little details that made a home warm, things Lily had built on her own, things he had never contributed to. Lucas immediately grabbed Eric's hand and tugged him toward the living room, eager to show him the blanket fort he and Leia had built the week before. Leia, still tired, curled into Lily's side on the couch. Eric didn't sit right away. He lingered near the armchair, watching the twins settle, observing every detail as if memorizing the room piece by piece. Lily handed Leia a cup of water and tucked a blanket around her legs. When she finally met Eric's eyes, he offered a small, almost shy smile, something she had never seen on his face before. "You should rest," he said softly. She sank back against the couch, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I can't. Not yet. My mind's still running." He hesitated, then asked, "Can I stay? Just for today. You don't have to talk. I'll sit here and be quiet. I just want to help if anything happens." Lily felt something warm flicker in her chest, not entirely trust, but something close. "All right," she said. "Stay." The day passed quietly. The twins napped. Lily dozed in intervals. And Eric sat in the armchair without moving, watching over all three of them like a silent guardian. When Leia whimpered in her sleep, he was the first to stand, adjusting her blanket carefully. When Lucas asked for a snack, Eric fetched it and cut the fruit into tiny pieces the way he had seen Lily do. Every action was gentle, measured, almost reverent. By evening, the apartment felt strangely peaceful. Lily warmed soup on the stove while Eric helped Lucas build a tower out of wooden blocks. She watched them, occasionally glancing away when emotion rose too strong. Seeing him like this, a man who once dismissed her, now fully devoted, was overwhelming in ways she hadn't prepared for. After dinner, Lily stepped onto the small balcony for fresh air. She rested her hands on the railing and closed her eyes, feeling the cool breeze brush her cheeks. She wasn't surprised when she sensed Eric join her a moment later. He stayed a respectful distance away, leaning against the opposite side of the railing. For a while, they watched the dim lights of the town below without speaking. He broke the silence first. "Lily," he said quietly, "I need to say something. And I need you to hear all of it." She didn't look at him. "Go on." "I can't change the past," he said, his voice thick with regret. "I can't undo the sentence I threw at you. I can't undo the 4 years I stole from myself and from them. But I want to spend the rest of my life trying to make up even a fraction of what I missed." She still didn't turn toward him, but her fingers tightened slightly on the railing. He continued, voice steady but full of emotion. "Seeing Leia in that hospital bed nearly destroyed me. I realized that I'm not scared of losing money or power or my career. I'm scared of losing you. I'm scared of losing them. I'm scared because for the first time in my life, something matters more than myself." Her breath hitched, barely audible. He turned toward her then, forcing himself to speak truths he had buried for years. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect trust overnight. But I want to be here, Lily. Every day. Every morning. Every night. I want to be the man I should have been from the beginning. Not for a week. Not for a month. Forever." She finally met his eyes, her expression conflicted, wounded, but undeniably touched. "Eric. I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "You hurt me so deeply. You shattered everything I believed about myself. I built this life alone because I had to." "I know," he said, stepping closer, slowly, cautiously. "But you don't have to stay alone." "People don't change that easily," she said. He shook his head. "I didn't change easily. It took me 4 years of emptiness to realize what I threw away. And every day since I found you again has shown me that I don't want to go back to who I was. I want to be better. For them. And, for you, if you'll let me." Her eyes softened, filling with tears. She tried to blink away. She wiped her cheek quickly, embarrassed. "I don't know if I can trust you completely. Not yet." He reached out, not touching her but offering his hand in the space between them. "Then start with this. Don't trust the man I used to be. Trust the man standing in front of you now. Trust the one who showed up at midnight without shoes. Trust the one who hasn't slept in 2 days because he watched our daughter breathe. Trust the one who would give up every deal, every dollar, every piece of pride just to stay in this small apartment if that's where you are." She stared at his hand for a long moment, too long, in fact, and Eric felt his heart pounding hard, terrified she would turn away. But then she placed her hand in his. Not firmly. Not fully. But enough. Enough to let him close his fingers around hers gently, reverently. "I can give you a chance," she whispered. "One chance. If you break it, we're done forever." A breath of relief left him, shaky and genuine. "I won't break it. I'm serious, Eric." "So am I." He stepped closer, their hands still joined, their breaths mingling in the cool evening air. She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned closer just slightly, enough for him to feel her warmth, enough to make his heartbeat crash violently in his chest. Inside the apartment, Lucas called for them, his small voice echoing. Lily let out a soft, tired laugh. "We should go in." Eric nodded but didn't release her hand until she gently slipped it free. As they walked back inside, the twins ran to them immediately, wrapping small arms around their legs. Lily lifted Leia, and Eric picked up Lucas, holding the boy with an ease that felt astonishingly natural. For the first time, they looked like a family. Not a broken one. Not an accidental one.